The depth sounder has been offline for 11 minutes. I'm recording that as the first fact because it is the first operational change I can document precisely. Hannah tried recalibration twice. Standard procedure, the kind of reset that handles instrument dropout from wave interference or power fluctuation. Neither attempt produced a reading. The display is not blank. It is returning data, but the data is not depth. The numbers cycle in a pattern that does not correspond to any sound or behavior I have seen before. Not random, cycling. The same sequence of values repeating on a period I have not yet measured because I have been watching the device. The device is still pointing straight down. Hannah has the helm. She is holding the Morwenna as close to stationary as wind and current allow, which at our position in open water means a slow drift that she corrects every few minutes. The vessel is not anchored. We are holding above the signal by active management. Maren is at the stern rail looking over the side. She has been there since I told her what the device was doing. I have not looked over the side yet. I want to finish the recording first. The depth reading sequence on the sounder display cycles through the same 8 values in the same order on a period I am now counting. I count 3 full cycles. 17 seconds. The sounder is not broken. It is reporting something. The values it is cycling through are not garbage. They are specific numbers, specific enough to have been produced by a functioning transducer reading a real surface. What they are reporting is not a single depth. They are reporting a range, values that begin at 104 meters and step down through 102, 197, 94, 90, 86, 83, and return to 104. A surface that cycles through different depths on a 17-second period, not rising and falling in the way a soft seabed responds to pressure changes. Stepping, 8 distinct depths in sequence, regularly, the same values in the same order, returning to the same starting point. The offshore structure is not static. Something within it moves on the 17-second interval. I write this down, and then look at what I have written, and then I go to the stern rail and stand next to Maren and look over the side. The water is not transparent at this depth and in these conditions. I'm not going to see 100 meters down with my eyes. What I'm looking at is the surface directly below the Morwenna's stern, and the surface is doing something. The color is different. Not dramatically, not the bioluminescent green of science documentaries, not anything theatrical. A difference in the quality of the dark beneath the surface. The water directly below us is darker than the water 5 meters to either side. Not because of depth. The depth is consistent across that range. The chart shows that. The darkness is localized. It occupies a circle approximately 6 meters in diameter centered below the vessel, and it does not move as the Morwenna drifts and Hannah corrects. When we drift, the dark circle does not drift with us. Hannah corrects back over it, and the circle is still there, fixed to the seabed, not to the ship. I tell Hannah to come and look. She secures the helm briefly and comes aft and leans over the rail beside me. She says, "That's not shadow." I say, "I know." She goes back to the helm without saying anything else. I watch the circle for a full 17-second cycle. At the end of the cycle, or what I'm calling the end based on the sounder's stepping pattern, the darkness shifts. A change in quality rather than position, the same way the device's tone changes quality rather than frequency when something in the system transitions state. The circle does not disappear or change size. It becomes for a moment less opaque, as though whatever is producing it has briefly reduced its effect on the water column above it. In that moment, in the brief reduction of opacity, I can see depth, not the structure itself, not detail, a sense of depth, the way you can tell that a dark room continues behind a partially open door even when you cannot see what is inside. The water column below the circle goes down, and it goes down into something that is not just seabed. The cycle ends. The opacity returns. 17 seconds later, the brief reduction happens again, and I watch more carefully this time, positioning my eye closer to the rail, minimizing the angle. The shape is circular. That is all I can say with confidence. The opening, if it is an opening, is circular, and it is aligned directly beneath the Morwenna. Not offset, not approximate, directly beneath the center line of the vessel. Hannah has rigged a camera line, a waterproof housing she keeps for underwater survey work attached to 50 meters of bright orange paracord, a dive light duct taped beside the lens. This is improvised and she says so. The housing is rated for recreational diving depth, not for this. She is lowering it anyway, slowly, monitoring the cord tension. The feed comes through to a tablet propped on the stern rail. At 20 meters depth, the feed shows open water, the dive light illuminating a cone of visibility in the dark. Particles suspended in the water column, normal for this environment. No structure visible. At 30 meters, the feed begins to show interference. Not complete dropout, a patterning in the image, a regular distortion that appears and disappears on what I am now confident is the 17-second cycle. The camera is seeing the interval. At 40 meters, the interference is constant and the image is partially unreadable. Hannah adjusts the housing angle remotely and the image stabilizes slightly for one cycle before degrading again. In the moment of stability, I see the image clearly. The camera is pointed at a surface, not seabed. The texture is wrong for sediment, wrong for geological formation. A flat surface at approximately 42 meters depth, which is significantly shallower than the sounder's reading, which is the same class of discrepancy as the Rook depth gap, which I note immediately and write down. The surface is smooth in a way that open water seabed surfaces are not, worked smooth. The dive light reflects off it without scattering the way light scatters off irregular stone or sediment. At 42 meters, there is a flat, worked surface. Hannah pulls the camera back up before the housing fails. She does not want to lose the equipment. The surface impression is what we have. I write, worked surface at approximately 42 meters depth. Not seabed, flat and smooth, consistent with intentional construction. Depth discrepancy against sounder reading, unresolved. Maren is still at the stern rail. She has not participated in the camera operation. She has been watching the dark circle in the water. When I come back to the rail, she says, without looking at me, "Don't try to reach it from here." I ask her what she means by reach. She says, whatever you're considering, the keys, the device, any contact approach from the surface. She pauses. This is not where the contact is meant to happen. I ask her how she knows that. She says, because the coastal site prepared a fitting and it is still empty. The stone prepared itself and nothing was placed in it. She looks at the circle in the water. The sequence isn't finished. This isn't the next step. This is what confirmed that the sequence is running. That is the most direct statement she has made about system logic since she arrived. Not mechanism, logic. She is describing a sequence with stages, and the offshore structure is not a stage in the sequence. It is a confirmation that the sequence is engaged. I write it down and ask her what the next stage is. She says, you'll know when the prepared stone tells you, which is not an answer. It is a redirect toward the coastal site. Back to the fitting geometry, the guidelines, the missing consequence mark. The offshore structure responded, but did not complete anything. The completion belongs somewhere else. I write, offshore structure equals confirmation, not completion. Coastal site still the active stage. Hannah calls from the helm. She wants me to watch the sounder display while she makes a slow pass across the area of the dark circle, moving the Morwenna laterally rather than holding station, watching whether the stepping values change with position. I watch the display through 2 slow passes. On the first pass, moving north of the circle, the stepping values shift. The range compresses. The values no longer step from 104 down to 83. They stay closer to 104, stepping to 102 and returning. Less range, less movement in the structure beneath. On the second pass, moving south, the values extend. The lower end of the stepping range drops further to 78 meters on one cycle. The structure is not uniform beneath the surface. It has geometry. Moving north of center produces a shallower, less active reading. Moving south produces a deeper, more active reading. The structure has a gradient, an orientation, a directionality. I bring Hannah's chart to the helm, and we look at the bearing together. The gradient in the sounder values aligns with a northeast to southwest axis, the same axis as the coastal headland, the same axis as the 1887 map's placement of the reference point relative to the network orientation markers. The offshore structure and the coastal site are aligned. They are not two separate phenomena that happen to respond to each other. They are two elements of a single system, separated by 19 kilometers of water, oriented on the same axis. I stand at the helm for a moment and look at the chart, and then out at the water, and then at the device, still in Hannah's hand, still pointing straight down. Then the device tone changes. Not direction, still vertical. The tone. A new frequency enters the continuous signal, higher than the primary, higher than the secondary frequencies I have documented before. Not unpleasant, clear, the way a bell tone is clear. A single additional frequency sitting above the existing signal. Hannah looks at the device. Maren comes forward from the stern. On the 17-second cycle, the new frequency spikes. A brief increase in amplitude on the same period as the sounder stepping, the hull vibration, the visual cycle of the dark circle below. The structure is not running one interval. It is running everything on the same interval. All its outputs synchronized to 17 seconds. At the end of the current cycle, the new tone spikes and holds. Does not return to baseline. Holds. Hannah says, it's not cycling back. The tone remains elevated. One spike, sustained. The device points straight down. The dark circle holds in the water. The sounder cycles through its stepping values on the 17-second period. And in the circle below, in the water directly beneath the Morwenna, at the moment the tone holds, visible for the first time without the camera, visible from the rail in the raw light of an overcast afternoon, the brief reduction in opacity lasts longer than any previous cycle. Longer than a moment. Several seconds. Long enough to see. In the opened water column at 42 meters, in the flat worked surface I saw in the camera feed, a recess. Circular. Its dimensions are not something I can measure from the surface at this distance in these conditions, but I can tell it is not small. And it is not the smooth worked surface. It is inside it. A deliberate void in a deliberate surface. The aperture is open. I look at it for 3, perhaps 4 seconds before the opacity returns and closes it from view. I look at Maren. She says that's not for you to enter from here. She says it the same way she says everything. Procedural, without drama. But she is looking at the water, not at me, and she does not move away from the rail. I look at the device. The elevated tone holds. The interval keeps its count. I look at the canvas bag at my feet with the second key inside it. Maren says, still looking at the water, the stone was prepared first. The stone is still waiting. The aperture below is closed now. The opacity is back. The dark circle sits in the water, and the Morwenna drifts 2 meters north, and Hannah corrects back over it, and the circle is still there, exactly where the structure is, exactly where it has been since we arrived above it. The device is pointing straight down into it. I reach for the canvas bag. Maren puts her hand on my arm.